All right, boys, we are continuing Perek Tezayin, very, very amazing and special chapter that we are discussing here. Where we left off last time was on the top of Chaf Beis, or the bottom of 42. What are we saying? We're saying there's a Klal Gadol by the Beinani. The Klal Gadol is that the main point is that he should be able to win out over his nature. Right? That's on the left side of the heart, so to speak. How does he do it? Hashem's light shines into him. How does Hashem's light shine into him? Because when he meditates, when he thinks about Hashem, when he thinks about how great Hashem is, that gives him a tremendous power to be able to win out over the Nefesh Bahamis, but over the animal soul. Right? And then we also talked about the idea of how really the meditation has to be in details. It cannot be a one-liner. Right? Or Rabbi Paltiel likes to say it can't be a bumper sticker. There are a lot of nice bumper stickers out there, but it's not going to have the impact. And we gave the whole mashal from the football game that we're not going to go into again this time. Right? So then we said that, however, sometimes it doesn't go. What do I mean that it doesn't go? Where we left off last time was with this idea that we understand, based on the information that we have in learning Chassidus, that Hashem deserves that everyone should be, their soul should be literally jumping out of their body and wanting to cleave to Hashem. He does everything for us. He's our everything. And therefore, really, we should have this unbelievable desire to just serve Hashem, to go out of ourselves to Hashem. Right? Also, based on the studying that I do, the learning that I do, I also deserve that I should be able to have those feelings. Like we said before, the idea of a burning fire that's in my heart that I just want Hashem, I want to serve Hashem, I want to do what's right. And when I have that burning fire in myself, what happens then is that the animal soul has no chance. So I'm able to fulfill my mission down here in this world. In other words, I was sent down to this world with a very specific mission. And my animal soul is blocking me from that mission. Not that it's a standalone thing. God made the animal soul too. But He wants us to overcome the animal soul, to overcome ourselves in order to be able to do what is right, do what is best, to go beyond ourselves in this world, to make the world a better place. Right? So what's happening is that I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do. We did point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, but I'm not able to develop that burning fire in my soul. So the question is, what do I do with this then? I mean, I'm following the instructions, I'm following the directions, and the output is not the output that I've been promised. So maybe things are not really going the way they should be going. Right? Maybe I'm at fault. Maybe I have a problem here. So the Alter Rebbe is going to come and show us that that is not the case. That I'm doing the right thing. And that I'm succeeding. Even though it doesn't necessarily appear that way, I'm succeeding much more than I could possibly ever imagine. Okay, that's where we're going to be holding. Okay, let's start on the bottom of page 42, second line from the bottom of the page. V'gam nafsho v'rucho asher bekirbo, which is in myself. Kach yaseh lahem lios kalos elav b'chashika v'chapitza letzeis minir taka hu aguf. Right? It's really, the person deserves it as well. That he should be able to go out of himself. Right? He's done everything that he's supposed to do. He's done the learning. He's done the meditating. He's done exactly what the instruction book says that he should be doing. So therefore, really, he deserves that his soul should be like jumping for joy, jumping out of himself, jumping out of the, as it's called here, minir taka, mainly like the sheath, like a sword, right? Which is the body. In order, lidafka boy. Lidafka mo means to cleave to Hashem. Isn't that what's supposed to be happening? Rakshabal karcha chayus, right? Heina b'tocha guf. So he says like this, it's like a play on words. Against his will he lives, right? If you look, that's a Mishnah in Avos, in Pirkei Avos, right? And over there, it's the Pashut Pshat of the simple meaning of what it's talking about is that things are not going so great for him. And really, he wishes that he would just leave this world because he's having so many difficulties and his life is so hard. But against his will, he lives. The inner, more pnimius, the more Kabbalistic, secret understanding of that phrase is different. What it means is that Shabal Karchacha Chai means that what? That really our souls should want to jump out of our bodies. They should be so excited about God that really that's the way it should be. But what do we have to do? We're here in this world. The body is keeping our souls in our bodies. And so therefore we are against it. We have to be here. That's the way it is. And then he says like this. He says, and it's like a woman that unfortunately her husband's gone off to overseas and they don't know where she is. And it's like, she's stuck. She doesn't know where her husband is. She's in a very precarious situation, very difficult situation. So that's the way it is. Ki'im ka'asher tfisa v'mislabeshes b'tayra v'mitzvasecha kamashal machabek as a melech hanal. Now, what is he referring to? He's saying like this. So really, based on all of my efforts, my soul should be going out of myself. But it's not happening. Whether it's because, like we said last time, because my soul is just not coming from, it doesn't come from the highest levels of the upper world. Whatever reason, this is the way God made me. Right? That's the way it is. That's the way God made me. Do I wish that I would have been a tzaddik? Maybe. But that's not what was supposed to be with my life. I'm supposed to be who I am. What's my proof? Look at myself. I have to look at myself and see who I am and recognize that this is what Hashem wants. And as we're going to see in chapter Chav Zayin, in chapter 27, we're going to see very clearly that Hashem wants each person to do his avoda, his personal avoda, up to his level. He doesn't demand of me that I should be someone that I'm not. He wants of me that I have to be the greatest me that I could be. That's what he wants from me. That's me fulfilling my mission in this world. No one's going to ask, right? Like the famous story of Reb Zusha, right? They're not going to ask Reb Zusha. Everyone knows this story, right? That why weren't you like Avram Avinu, or why weren't you like Moshe Rabbeinu when he comes up to Shemayim? They're going to say, why weren't you the greatest Reb Zusha that you could have possibly been? That's what Hashem wants from me. So now, but I still want to cleave to Hashem. So how do I do it? Right? So based on his meditation, he does recognize in his brain that this is something that he wants. He might not be feeling it in his chest. He might not be feeling it in his heart that he's jumping for joy and he's like wanting to, do kalas and nefesh here, right? That his soul just leaves his body. But he does recognize that he realizes that he has a mission. He came down to this world for a mission and he wants to fulfill the mission. What is the mission? What God told us to do. What is that? Torah mitzvah. So how do I cleave to Hashem then? How do I do it? So he explained in chapter 4 that Hashem, in his infinite wisdom and in his infinite will, he lowered himself down. What did he lower himself down into? Into our Torah and into our mitzvahs. That are things that we could grab onto. Things that are very physical. Like we're learning, right? We're learning right now in my Gemara class, we're learning about a sukkah. And we're trying to understand what are the dimensions of a sukkah. If you think about it, who cares what the dimensions of a sukkah is? If you tell me sitting, or what is this whole thing about sitting in a sukkah bichlal? So I'll tell you a 1,000 different nice pieces of Torah about why it's so amazing to sit in a sukkah. Okay, good. But it has to be 20 amas, not 20 amas, 21 amas if it's 21 amas, and if you put a embroidered cloth underneath the schach, what's going to happen if it's for this reason? Seemingly, it's like, what are we doing here? What's the point of this whole story? So Hashem, in his infinite wisdom, he lowered himself down to a point that my brain, my human brain, could understand this information. And that's grasping him. Or a mitzvah, putting on a pair of tzitzis, right? We're wearing tzitzis, right? We have a woolen garment and we have these threads sticking out of it, and seemingly like, I don't know okay, this is what it is. By putting on tzitzis, I'm doing the will of Hashem. By shaking a lulav on Sukkot, we were talking about Sukkot before, that's doing the will of Hashem. Right? By putting on tefillin, that's doing the will of Hashem. So these are all tangible things. And if you look at it, majority of the Torah, majority of the mitzvahs that we are asked to do are all physical things that we could touch with our hands. So an example that is given is in the Kutei Torah, it brings an example of, for example, if you take water, and water comes down, and it becomes, when it's a cold day, it could become snow. So when you could take the snow, you can grab the snow. And it's the same thing. It's the same hydrogen molecules and oxygen molecules that are in the water. Or even before the water, right, it was a gas, right? So it's the same hydrogen molecules and oxygen molecules. It's the same thing. Yes, it's true that maybe the molecules are moving at a different speed, and therefore, because it's colder or it's hotter or whatever, so it looks different. I can't grasp a hydrogen molecule or an oxygen molecule. I could touch the water, but I can't hold on to it. The water's just going to... But I could take a snowball and throw it at someone. The same thing with regards to... That's why Torah in general is compared to water. Because if you look at the top of Niagara Falls and you look at a drop of water, it's the same water on the top that comes down to the bottom. It's the same thing. It's one thing, right? So in chapter 4, the Alter Rebbe gives the example of a king. And it's like you're hugging a king, right? That's what it's like. When you hug a king, does it matter if he's wearing a t-shirt or a suit or maybe even his mink coat? Whatever it's wearing, it doesn't matter. He could be wearing 100 garments. The point is that I'm hugging the king. When I'm hugging the king, it's the king that I'm hugging. And that's how I can cleave to Hashem. That's how I can make this connection. Okay? That's what he says. That really we deserve, that we should be able to cleave, to hug onto the king. Now look at the words here. That sounds like right from Shema. Dahainu, namely what? Kiyum hatariyag mitzvahs, to do the 613 mitzvahs, b'maisa, and in action, ubedibor, in speech, ubemachshava, and in thought, shehi hasagas v'yediyas haTorah. So thought is obviously thinking about the Torah, thinking about the wisdom of the Torah, right? Like we were talking about before. We're talking about a sukkah that's 21 amas versus 20 amas. We're talking about if you spread out a sheet on top of the schach or under the schach, and what's the purpose of the sheet, and all that information is my mind grasping Hashem's wisdom, because it's one with Hashem, right? Canal. When you go deep into this idea, with the hidden recesses of your heart and your brain, the piv and your mouth, v'livo shabin, and your heart are one. Shemekayim kain, that you're able to fulfill this, befiv, right, in your mouth, like when you're speaking out these words of Torah. K'fi asher nigmar b'tfunas libo v'moicho, namely what? It's all based on what? What's making him do this? And this is what he's coming back to. Because now he's saying, okay, it's true. You did step 1. You learned the Chassidus. You did step 2. You thought about God. You thought about what God is. But step 3 didn't happen. Step 3 was supposed to be that you're supposed to be feeling this unbelievable love for Hashem, that your soul wants to jump out of you and you're feeling ecstasy. Let's call it like that, right? And I don't feel it. So he's saying here, it's true, you're not feeling that tremendous emotion, but you are experiencing something. The fact that you did step 1, you learned the Chassidus, you learned about God, you learned about His being everywhere and everything. Number 2, you really thought about it. It wasn't just, in a way that is like, okay, whatever, put the book on the shelf now. You spend time thinking. Right, like our Tanya classes. It's not enough just to read the book and then put it back on the shelf. You have to think about What is the Alter Rebbe telling us? What is he trying to teach us? What are we trying to learn from this? What are we trying to integrate into our lives from this? And it made me get to a point. That it makes sense. I buy into this. This works for me. I'm going to do this. In other words, it makes sense to me that this is what's going to work. The fact that I don't feel it emotionally, okay, we'll deal with that in a minute. But I do have a decision that I've made in my mind that this is the truth. This is my mission, and I'm going to fulfill that mission. So it's not just that I'm doing all this by rote. I'm not putting on tefillin by rote. I'm not wearing my tzitzis by rote. I'm not davening by rote. I'm not learning by rote. I've made a conscientious decision to say that, you know what? This is worth it for me to do. I'm going to spend my time doing this. I'm going to learn. I'm going to daven. I'm going to do the mitzvah. And it's based on that decision that I am actually pushing forward. That is a big deal, right? That is a big deal. And that's what we're saying here. And that's what's pushing him. That's what's pushing him to actually, going back to chapter 4, use the garments of his soul, the thought, the speech, and the action to, in fact, become completely enclosed within the Torah and the mitzvahs, i.e. in God. So that's what he says here. That he concluded in the inner recesses of this tfuna, of his lave, and his mayach. Namely, it's not a real emotion. It's not that emotion. He's not feeling ecstatic. But it is a decision that he's come to. It's a make sense decision that he's come to based on his work. Namely, that he is going to spend his time learning Torah. And he's going to learn day and night. He's actually going to put himself into it. In other words, he's not just doing it because his father told him, and he's not just doing it because he's in this type of school or that type of school. He has come to the decision that this is what I want. So it's a decision that he made. So therefore he's doing it. Befiv, with his mouth, namely he's speaking out the words of Torah. So that's dibur, right? Like we said before, the machshava, the thought, the garment of thought, he's investing in learning. Mouth, the garment of speech, he's invested in talking about Torah. V'chein hayadayim, and also his hands. V'shari varim, and all the rest of his limbs. Mekayimim ha-mitzvahs, they're doing the mitzvahs. Kefi mashab nigbar b'tfunas liba v'maycho. All based on what? The decision he's made. Hare tvuna zu mislabeshes b'maisa diba b'machshava satayra v'mitzvaseha. So now there is some energy here. There is some gasoline that's going into things here. Because he has invested himself and he has spent his time meditating, thinking. He spent his time invested in his relationship with God. So now that power is going to go and invest itself into all the Torah and the mitzvahs that he's doing. It's going to make things different for him. Because it's not just that he's doing it by rote. He's doing it based on the avoda. That's what's happening here. So now all of a sudden the Torah and mitzvahs, they have a energy to it. Or like the Zohar says, they're gadfin. What's gadfin? Gadfin means wings in Aramaic. Right? So we understand that the Zohar says that the gadfim, that all mitzvahs need two wings. What wings? Love and fear. They need to have, on the one hand, love and excitement of doing this mitzvah, whatever it happens to be. On the other hand, they have to have fear. They have to be done in a serious way. That when you put on tefillin, you recognize, I'm putting on tefillin. Tefillin are serious. It's like wearing a Sefer Torah. I can't just be, going around and talking to everyone with my tefillin on and just hanging out. I have to take this seriously. right? This is like the real deal. On the other hand, I have an excitement. I want to put on tefillin. I have the opportunity to put on. That's amazing. Wow. So he hasn't. So this tvuna, this tefuna that he has invested in his brain, in his consciousness, of his decision-making process, is now what? Is now investing into the mitzvah. And that's where we're going to go with this. Okay, so that's it for today, boys. We'll continue Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow.